as a buyer, I think it'd be really refreshing if who I was working with actually sat down and was almost forced to use a tool that made them just listen to what was most important to me and give me the ability. And I like a good spreadsheet, so I like to play around it. Give me the ability to just tweak the assumptions and make them my own. Now you're talking about what your client values the most, not what product you've been sent there to sell.
B2B sales isn't broken, it's blind. Buyers don't see your value, deals die in the budget queue, and the best solution doesn't always win. Guy Talk brings the voices reshaping how you sell, win, and grow. That's Guy Talk, hosted by me, Guy Mobley. What's up, guys? Thank you for joining another Guy Talk episode. I'm your host, Guy Mobley, and today I have these two wonderful gentlemen with me, Mr. Pat Queenan and Mr. Patrick Burke. For those of you guys that don't know these gentlemen, Pat is a trusted advisor. He's a humble leader. He has unmatched experience in operations and customer experience. His most recent leadership role, and he's been in multiple, he's overseen customer service strategies, technologies, and operations that have covered tens of millions of end users around the world. And Mr. Patrick Burke, he's an experienced operator who's helped companies grow from early stages through major scale. He knows employer and payer markets inside and out, and he brings a deep fluency of commercial strategies and what actually drives business forward. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Great
It's
to
a
be
pleasure,
here.
Guy.
Yeah,
It's
nice to see you.
it's super exciting to have you guys on. I know, we've only been working together for a few months at this point, but I know when Ryan was like, "Oh, we're gonna have Pat Queenan join our team, and we're gonna have Patrick Burke join our team, two studs, just like expanding our roster." I was like, "Okay, we are building an absolute Avenger team at Beyond Banyan." So it's super cool to have you guys here as seasoned professionals with someone this is my first job out of college, and I get to talk to you guys like this on a day in, day out basis. It's super special.
I've learned so
Oh,
much from Patrick over
see,
my
now people
career.
are gonna start
It's
tuning out right
it's
away. I thought
unbelievable.
this was supposed to be like what's real deal authenticity. Right back at you, Pat. It's really good to see you and really good to be reconnected again after our many
Yeah,
years
for
of working
sure,
together.
for
And
sure.
you know, today we have like a super cool opportunity to talk about um, from walking into Q1. I mean, it's December now. We're walking in to Q1, and from a leadership standpoint, you're preparing your team, you're gearing up for a successful year, and yet so many teams walk into January feeling enthusiastic but underprepared. And from a young sales professional and a young professional standpoint, why exactly is that the case?
I think that sales kickoffs, kicking off the year, is a lot like the holidays. If you're hosting, for example, whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah, you're having a big gaggle of people over to your house. The question is, when they open the door and the first guest comes through, it feels like it's all put together. Everybody's happy, everything's clean, the food is prepared, um, and behind the scenes, majority of the time, it was a scramble just to get to the door and open it.
Yeah, well,
Well,
I want to pick up on that. Everything's clean. Yeah, just don't open the closet. Yeah, you can see where I shoved
that,
everything that was dirty. Yeah.
that's a good, very fair, Pat. But I think, Guy, the best way I would describe it is, as you're looking at your career, your work in commercial, is it's very akin to that when you look at a sales kickoff January time, which every enterprise company looks to January as a time where they're kicking off, they're training their sales people, they're aligning their operational product and clinical colleagues, all the things. But here we are in December. What are you doing? You're closing as many commercial deals as you possibly can. You're renewing the clients that you've been serving. You're building your budget for next year, which, by the way, includes the targets that the commercial team is going to have to go get in the coming year. And so all that stuff is happening. And then you flip it into January and you're like, you have to be ready to go. So I think that December often distracts and prevents true alignment. I mean, at the end of the day, the best executed teams I've ever worked with have been really aligned. And what I mean by alignment, that means not only the targets are set and handed out to the commercial people, but all those other executives and their teams, product, operations, etc., have aligned on kind of what the plan is for the coming year. Because the only way enterprise deals are landed is in concert with those stakeholders. I mean, that's in my opinion. I don't know, Pat, what you think.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to come at this from having been in the seat of actually buying services, technology, a variety of combinations of those things, and it is interesting how well the operator, the delivery person, and their partners are December goes kind of quiet, and yeah, it's everyone's busy in the kitchen getting the meal ready, but it goes quiet. But that's such a perfect time to really understand from a buyer standpoint, where they're at, because the buyer has their targets too. It's not just the quota that the you as a seller have. It's your buyer, whether it's a cost save, whether it's client retention, whatever business they're in, they're clearly, especially in this day and age, they're going to be looking to change something, transform something. If you had a great year the previous year, you're just going to be asked to do more. And if you had a bad year the previous year, you're going to be asked to do more. And I think that December holiday time, while you're busy mashing the potatoes and making your favorite meal, might be a decent time to just take a deep breath, take a step back, go talk to your customers, talk to your clients, and just understand what they know, how it's looking. They'll have a pretty good idea of what's going to be happening in the first of the year, so you don't have to start up those conversations in the first of the year. You can start up the first of the year already knowing what challenges your client has.
Pat,
So
that's a good point. What the thread I'd pull maybe just for a sec is in prep for January, and to your point, Pat, about closing out the year and the things that are happening. The other thing that is happening is preparing for January, which are things like um, product roadmap, which are things like operational execution. Like, what is it that when we're selling in enterprise, what are our commitments? What commitments can we make? All that stuff is getting put into the stew of sorts that's going to comprise the focus of the sales kickoff, the types of talking that's going to happen, or the speakers are going to have, the training that's going to happen. And in reality, that stuff is getting all cobbled together in bits and pieces, fragmented to the best of everyone's ability. This is not a condemnation. It's just the kind of the truth in my experience anyway. And it all gets kind of packaged up in the early part of January for whenever the sales kickoff event or the commercial kickoff event is. And the missed opportunity is when we are talking about these things about alignment, that means that we know that commercial and finance are super clear on the revenue and the operation, like the operating expense kind of targets that everybody gets. And the missed opportunity sometimes is like that it tied into that is the value story, like the claim that every company makes about saving their client money, delivering higher quality or whatever those things is. And I think the opportunity, since it's 2025 now, and we have going into 2026, we have so many more tools available to us to do a better job, to kind of take product and operations and clinical together and kind of, as they're setting targets, establish the rest of it. Like, what's the return story going to be for hiring us? What's the, I mean, those types of things are really missed opportunities in the past. I don't know that tech and other things were there for us to be able to do that. Well, I know I haven't had a single year in over, I'll say 30 years, sadly, of doing this work that anyone ever felt super equipped in January, other than knowing you had your targets, and whether it was a cost target for ops or a revenue target, no one believed that they could meet the target that they were given.
Yeah, imagine a world, Pat. Let's wave a magic wand. Imagine a world where you go into that sales kickoff in January, where you're going to get your targets, you're going to see new things on product, you're going to get all the energy and rah rah. And let's say you've prepared in December. You've spent time with your clients, especially your existing clients. Who doesn't have a strategy to try and expand with their existing clients? So you know what their needs are going to be, where they're trying to either, like you said, save money, grow, what have you. Maybe you've also spent time with your operations and deliveries teams. You know what their capacity is. You know what challenges they had. You know what they're most excited about with the product. Imagine going into a sales kickoff with all that energy and all the fun times and all the connection with your colleagues that we all crave. And you actually have real case studies, real clients, real thoughts in mind. And the people who are going to deliver what you sell are sitting right next to you, just as excited that you're successful as well, because they
Yeah.
know you're going to sell the thing that their clients are craving the most and that they're going to go deliver. Now that sounds like alignment. Okay. Show of hands, whoever's listening to this, who actually had all those conversations in November and December to actually have the real case studies going into January. And I'm sure there are, but that alignment and it is pretty powerful. I work with many providers multiple years in a row, so plenty of opportunity for them to go figure out what was going on before they show up in January all excited about their new AI technology. And then they show up and they show it to me. It has nothing to do with my business. I, like, talk to me. I like to talk. I'll answer your questions. And then you show up with your great new product, your great new service. And if it applies to what my business is and what my targets are, guess what? You're going to get the next meeting. Slam dunk. Because you're helping me. And in the end, I think that all of that excitement, all the hangover from the year end, all the time prepping in the kitchen somehow got in the way of doing the most fundamental thing, which is just listening to your client. And to listen, you got to ask.
And that brings up a great point. I mean, that's huge. And you guys both, took, how important alignment is. And it starts early. It doesn't start in December. It starts in November into December. And then you already have had those conversations and you're geared up and ready for January. For leaders that aren't doing that, when are those first cracks starting to appear when you're not really aligned and you believe that you are?
Maybe, Guy, I'll take a first swipe at that. I think you start to see some cracks even during this sales kickoff or the commercial kickoff in how the team is or isn't feeling like, as you said, Pat, it's a success-oriented plan. And well, at the end of the day, commercial people, operations people, we're all human beings. And so if you're entering the year with that kind of like pit in your stomach, which frankly, everyone who's in commercial has some version of that, same with operations, to be honest about it. Um, but some of it is like to call out, Guy, like what is normal, like the buying reality, the cycle, the time pressure is what gives you that knot in your gut. Because to land new revenue in the enterprise world, at least in healthcare and employer and health plan market, it can vary from this. But generally speaking, Q1, Q2 is when you're doing discovery, you're scoping, you're exploring, you're having those early conversations because summertime is decision time ish, like into the early fall max. Like that's where the most decisions are going to be made. So to have a strong fall, that means that really January 2nd or whatever the business day is after the new year, the gunfires and everybody's racing to do what Pat was
Yeah,
saying is go reach for somebody, have a conversation, and you're not the only one doing it. So I think that the first cracks in it come in January for lots of reasons, but internally it's because the team doesn't feel super prepared. Externally, I don't know, Pat, you were mentioning, why don't you talk about what that's like on the buying side when somebody
yeah. On the
arrives?
buying side, the cracks show up, and sometimes it's a debrief on what happened the previous year. You always get what's new, and it's like you get the hammers that are looking for nails, and then you say,
Hmm.
well, here's the nails I've got, and they've got a hammer that can't hit that nail, and so that's the analogy I'm using there, and so I think the cracks show up from a buyer right away when you're trying to debrief the previous year, and your provider is looking to hit something with this shiny new hammer, and you're like, yeah, you missed. Now it's what, end of January, early February, and to your point on the season and the cycle, it might almost be too late, especially if you're talking about implementing new technologies, new solutions. There's heavy training, there's heavy system integration. The things that to do it right. Just take time. Whereas you got all the nails, you show up at SKO, and you figure out what hammers you have, and then you're ready to go on January 2nd, putting what you have to help your clients pound those nails in, and now you got a chance to deliver it in year. You get to the fall, especially in the healthcare space. You get to the fall, and you've implemented exactly what's needed for going into the next season.
The funny part is I listen to us, Guy. If you're sitting there, especially, newer to your career, it's like, well, how does anybody ever succeed? Well, it's there's almost a normalcy to everybody being that behind that levels the playing field a little bit.
Mm.
To be honest about it, it's sort of a very similar scramble by many. And I don't think that you or we intend this conversation to be of like doom and gloom. It's kind of like, just if this is the reality, and we know that January is literally performance time. It's not prep time, even though we're all still prepping and performing. The question really becomes like, so what are we doing to address those struggles, like to sell value? Because it's never too late, especially when your product or solution is really strong.
Mm.
It's about cutting, in my view anyway, about cutting through the din of all the claims that are out there and a lot of the same sounding solutions and promises. And that's a real opportunity that can accelerate, much like we were talking about earlier. It is 2025 with the onset and the advent, I should say, of AI, the advent of new tech, of new ways of doing things. And so why not think about, even though I think the majority will remain behind in January, like the so what? Like, what can we do? Which I think there's a lot, don't you, Pat, about what we can be doing differently
Yeah,
to accelerate and catch up, or however you want to think about it.
for sure. And I think many organizations do a great job getting in tune, whether it's in January or December with their customers. And we spent time here talking about how it might be too late with the SKO. But let's say you get it and you're ready to go and you've got a great product or a great service. I think then, instead of being a hammer looking for nails, you know what your clients are trying to solve, and no one's going to differentiate themselves with a PowerPoint and fancy slides. You're actually going to differentiate yourself by getting in there in your customer's operation, understanding what's really going to drive them to help hit their targets, how they're going to describe value in their words, and and putting it in their hands then to own it and take it forward to whoever their boss is, whoever's going to make the decision. I think the more you show up with your deck and expect someone you're selling to take your deck and go present it to someone else, that's another place where it gets stuck. Even if you've got the best hammer and it's lining up with the best nail, you actually got to use the words and put it in the words of the customer and really understand who they got to take it to next. I think that's another place where, as a buyer, giving me something that in most cases, my boss already threw you out of the room and threw the deck out of the room. It's like it's not gonna help out. Guess what's gonna happen? Whereas you really understand how I'm gonna present this, how I'm gonna take it forward, how I'm gonna honestly, how you're gonna help your client look good at their organization. That's value. That's real value.
Interesting. Like you talked about the PowerPoint, and I think it reminds me of a little thing that we learned early days when we were working at that extraordinary place called Hewitt, and we were really taught pretty bluntly that no presentation wins the deal. It's not about the presentation. The deck itself has got to be tight. There's a standard you've got to have, and you should have a high quality, but it's never been the reason you won or lost a deal, right? It's been about trust. And I think it was very different when we were growing up in our careers, Guy, at a time when it wasn't as hyper competitive or crowded, or tech wasn't where it is today. But trust is still the same. Like if we're providing a service, they're trusting the people who are standing behind the service. If it's a tech and human service, they want to trust that both will work. But to your point, Pat, something interesting you said is it really gets down to like the tangible, like the math. Like we talked really high level about the types of things like product and operations and the types of things people can do. But like at the end of the day, um, every company that is worth its weight anymore has calculated what they believe the value is in the form of return on investment, return on value, and they've done math. But that is often meant that it's math held by a few people, maybe product and finance and operations, and then it lands on a slide. The
Yeah.
slides you just talked about, the one slide that'll go up the chain and be like, I don't believe it, because the
Yeah.
CFO is like, nah, it's so general. I don't know. And that's a territory that we've lived through my whole career. I mean, and I spent the last 8 years in early stage companies, and it's not just about large enterprises who have spreadsheets galore. Every company that's really earnestly trying to drive value has figured out what the math would be to prove that. The challenge
Yeah.
is if it's in multiple spreadsheets, there's a disconnect between that and translating it into what you said, I think, really well as a buyer is like, in my world, what does that mean?
Yeah, I love a good spreadsheet. The power of a good spreadsheet is it does the math for you and tends not to make mistakes, but a spreadsheet can also be garbage in, garbage out. And if you live in a spreadsheet and you haven't aligned with your buyer on the math being, because you get measured in seconds, so there's a lot of math around the seconds. They're like, well, if I take 5 seconds out of every call, I will save you hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 5 years. I'm like, okay, let's break that down. If someone's taking 30 calls in a day and all 30 of those calls are 5 seconds shorter, like you are not going to take any people out of the operation. You're just going to move to the next call quicker. You can't even take a 31st call in a day. So how are you going to save any money? So some of the funky math that looks really good on spreadsheets that are really tied to the value the way your client is talking about it. And I think that's what you're getting at, Patrick, when you've become a trusted partner. Everyone likes to use that term, but you've really become a
Well,
trusted partner because I'm
yeah,
not using my math. I'm not using McKinsey's math. I'm using you, client, your math.
and right on.
No offense to the McKinsey people, the smartest people in the room, always. But sometimes the spreadsheets can get in the way.
Well, and isn't it also practical that um, it's challenging in a commercial or a sales or existing client situation to um, pull out that spreadsheet and have everybody, both parties, the person facing off to that client or prospect and the client or prospect themselves being comfortable in that math. And I'm not saying it in a disparaging way, but more of like, that's not the usual on 9 times out of 10. Um,
Yeah,
it,
that's right.
and I think that that's something that, we can talk about a bit later, but the, the way in which the practical issues are about time. How much time does it take? Is it repeatable? How hard is it? Is a great opportunity in in 2026 where there's a lot more available to what I'll call, like, at least what we've been talking about internally here, is to change the way work is done. That's find a way to simplify those conversations and be able to deliver that personal, like, let's sit down, and it doesn't have to be an hour with three people from finance who have to join. It's like, let's just sit down and run some rough math together, Pat, much like, you know, you've outlined.
I think with, you guys are kind of tiptoeing all around like what the value engine is and what we're doing here at Beyond Banyan. It's really beautiful in the sense of building trust with your buyer in a collaborative way where I'm welcoming your scrutiny as a buyer. From a seller standpoint, I'm like, I want you to tell me what's wrong with this so I can make you comfortable with it and you can see that I'm building mutual impact. Like I want to impact your business at the end of the day and the alignment's not there, it's all good. Like we can continue to work together and see if something works down the line or whatnot. So, how has that really changed things in your perspective, Pat, and in your perspective, Patrick?
Maybe just
Yeah,
to anchor on what value engine is first. Sorry, Pat, like, just because I
no, go
think for
ahead.
those who may be tuning in, I mean, the simplest way I like to, I've come to kind of think about it is this collaborative tech. It's allowing for what you just said, Guy. It's allowing to change up how a commercial person, salesperson, a client person could welcome in other stakeholders with a client who may say, look, I'd love to run my own numbers. Um, and we'll say, great, if you have a benefit consultant, if you have a finance person that you just want to kind of make sure your math is tight, this platform really supports that through that sales or client process. That's what Value Engine, at the essence, the simplest way I could describe it is, and it's iterative, collaborative, configurable, which means it's dynamic enough by the end of a conversation, even a 20-minute or 30-minute conversation, there's a personalized slide deck, if you will, that contains what the client may want to be able to bring to their boss. That's the best way I think about it. So Pat, over to you though. You're as a buyer.
Yeah, as a buyer, I think it'd be really refreshing if who I was working with actually sat down and was almost forced to use a tool that made them just listen to what was most important to me and give me the ability. And I like a good spreadsheet, so I like to play around it. Give me the ability to just tweak the assumptions and make them my own. Now you're talking about what your client values the most, not what product you've been sent there to sell. And so the discipline that comes from it, the process that comes from it, can really help and remind everyone, like, just get back to listening to what your client's looking for. And this tool really then lets it take it all the way through to the end, get it over the finish line, because a lot of people get stuck at different points leading up to that finish line.
Yeah, I think um, maybe to tie a bow on it. To me, what I've noticed even in the past couple of months um, is that it does lead to that credibility, Pat, where um, you don't feel sold to. I feel like you're really trying to tune in to help me solve a problem.
Yeah.
And my problem is unique to me as a company. I know it could be in the same category as my competitors, but I have my own challenges. So I think in many ways, it differentiates our clients who use Value Engine. It actually just helps them stand apart, not only because their numbers can be better and defensible, but the second is the approach is partnering.
Is very different.
Right.
Yeah,
And
very different.
that is, in and of itself will lead to the other two things we know we promise our clients, right? Which is essentially that you can unlock budget. Because if it's truly like we were just, having a conversation today about a shared client today, and they're like, you know what? I can actually take some of the expense I have and remove it and work with you guys to do this. And that may not be for everyone. We know this, but like that's the idea of like you with your solution being able to have a client go, wow, you can really help me. I can unlock budget. And because that helps the third thing we know we help our clients with is that way any business case up the chain internally has the alignment and confidence of the people who helped sit down with the salesperson and build the business case. And that's what Value Engine, even in the past just 2 months I've been working together, is already unlocked for a number of clients that I'm working with.
Yeah, and honestly, don't take it from us. The clients we're working with
Yeah.
echo those
Yeah.
exact same points, which I think in the
Yeah.
end is our point. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So with that said, and for the people that are tuned in and listening, as they're preparing to go into January, and going into Q1 and Q2, what can they do differently to be successful for the year?
Yeah, I'll start. And I've got both a delivery operations hat as well as the buyer hat on. And let's say you can't get to your client because they're going to take a needed break, and maybe you want to take a needed break. But that collaboration we talked about, the alignment we talked about with product and sales and the operations and finance are all aligned. I mean, maybe you practice. Maybe you go talk to some of your operations people and say, "Tell me about the clients you're delivering to, and let me practice this value conversation, practice listening." And then, I mean, I think you can start doing that now and start not only learning more about what your delivery colleagues are faced with and how you can bring that into your conversations early in January. You'll also be better prepared in the mindset of talking about value. It can't go wrong. No, a little bit of practice, and we all hate to do it, but a little bit of practice can go a long way.
I think that's a great point, Pat. I hadn't exactly thought about it when you first asked the question. I was thinking first about kind of the executive team that's kind of looking at how they're going to make the year happen. But I couldn't agree more, Pat, that like that, in many ways strengthens everybody. It's confidence of ops and research and clinical, and also the salesperson who's out in the market. That is a great example of alignment. And I think if I step back, that same exercise, if you're a founder, if you're a CEO or a chief commercial officer, is to do what you're describing, Pat, as a cross-functional reset. Just like give people, like you're never too late. If you can do this soon enough, you have the ability to create the alignment that you may not have, in that first week in January. That's all good. Um, that builds confidence across them. Everyone is catching their breath after closing the year. And some businesses pick up their busy season in January, so it may not work for everybody, but that cross-functional reset strengthens enterprise teams, as you and I both know, having lived that in different lives. It'll also do something which I think is the second maybe thing people can do right now, which is it tightens the narrative. If I'm practicing with you, Pat, you're giving me feedback that something's not landing at an individual salesperson level, obviously I'm going to get stronger. I'll get crisper about it. But that same can be true across the executive team and the teams themselves, where you might have solution architects or solution engineers who are the experts to go into these very large deals at times. That all tightens the value narrative, and everybody can do that. I mean, that's just optimizing. And then you're not waking up in March going, I can't believe we have so many deferreds and so many losses. And you're wondering why, because it may not be about product or solution. It may just be about the strength of the narrative, really.
Yeah, that's right. There's some practical things you can do. We've mentioned the SKO process here quite a bit, and people tend to be rule followers. Give them some homework. Like, how about some pre-work before the SKO, before the end of the year? And it might start with get to know the people who are getting invited. A lot of good energy is put into the logistics to pull off a powerful and energetic SKO. How about getting to know those people? How about you as one of those executives, you pay attention that are all the salespeople sitting together, or all the ops people sitting together, or all the lawyers sitting together? That's not how deals get done in any organization. They need to be working it together, and that might be the number one thing you give them as homework, and see what kind of amazing results might happen from there. And if instead of shaking hands and introducing themselves at that SKO, they're actually catching up and talking about, wait for it, clients and deals. And they're working on
Yeah.
closing them in January just as aggressively as they were in December. What a dream. What a dream.
It is true. I mean, the ultimate alignment is no matter where you sit in an organization for a client or customer focused company, everybody wants the same thing, and that is growth,
Yeah.
which means new clients or customers, which means they stay with us because they retain. That's the unifying theme. And maybe the other thing that's maybe just an intention or maybe a big go get in 2026 is to add something to our list of New Year's resolutions, which is really re-anchor on value, like proof, defensibility. Like we've all lived so many lives in various companies we've been in where we've been in that value neighborhood. We've been talking about it. We can prove it. We believe it. Quality teams, and yet at the end of the day, in this economy, it's showing your math. It's leaning in. It's changing up like how we do work with our clients and bringing more people into the fold. Like we talked about this business case, probably 5, 6 times already, but that's really leaning in on value. And I think every company who does that in 2026 is going to have a phenomenal execution of their plan
That's
for the year.
that's well said. And honestly, if your buyer doesn't engage with you in that value, won't give you the secret sauce, won't engage in a true value conversation, the odds are pretty low there's anything to be sold there anyway.
Yeah, and that may not be for now the best matchup for that client for you,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I agree. That's a well said. Well said.
Well, gentlemen, I can tell you that if we just randomly start seeing all these organizations having tremendously successful years, we're going to attribute it to this podcast right here because this was an amazing episode. You guys crushed it, and I'm so thankful to have you guys on. It's been a awesome learning experience for me because that's what Guy Talk's all about, right? Being short, being sharp, being impactful. And this podcast definitely was impactful. So thank you guys so much for taking this time out of your day and joining Guy Talk.
Guy, thanks for teaching a couple old dogs some new tricks.
100%. Thanks for having us, Guy, and
Thanks.
anytime. Anytime.